In CIST 2602, Chapter 4, we're going to look at network and host designs and diagnosis. First, we'll start looking at a manageable network plan. This is a process that's been created by the NSA, the National Security Agency, to assist in making networks manageable, defensible, and secure. Now, milestone 1, we'll talk about milestones in this. These are a component of the manageable network plan, and it's going to indicate an action or an event. So milestone 1 is to prepare to document. A couple of the key points for document, you want to establish a process you will use to document your network. Now, a useful document is something that's easy to use. It does include enough detail. It documents the important things, uses timestamps, is protected with restricted access and possibly encryption. And it also has a printed hard copy. It's going to be kept in a secure location. So once we're prepared to document, we'll move into milestone 2, which is to map your network. Now, mapping your network ensures that you're aware of all the components of the network and that you know where the physical devices are. So the steps in this is to create a map of the network, create a list of all your devices. Don't forget to include your wireless devices. You may use a network scanner and then also confirm manually with a room-by-room walkthrough. Identify who's responsible for each device and detail other information such as the IP address, service tags, physical location. Also consider using a database file to store this information. You may also use a network. You want to create a list of protocols being used in the network by using a network analyzer. And you can consider removing unauthorized devices or protocols from your network. Now, when you create your manageable network plan, you want to make sure that if you have a large network, you use a network scanner. This will automatically scan all the devices on your network. One that you could use would be Nmap. This will move us into milestone 3, to protecting your network. Now, when you protect your network, which is your network architecture, this identifies the following steps to protect your network. You want to identify and document each user on the network and then the information the user has access to. You identify the high-value network assets, document the trust boundaries, identify the choke points on the network, segregate and isolate networks, isolate server functions, and then you also want to physically secure high-value systems. This will move us into milestone 4, which is access your network. So this is the device accessibility. This helps to ensure that all your devices on your network can be easily accessed while still maintaining the device's security. Now, the accessibility includes physical access as well as remote access. So the important considerations to include is do not use insecure protocols. Use the Windows group policy to administer Windows systems. Make sure that remote access connections are secure. And you want to automate administration as much as possible on your network. We do have some more networking milestones we'll talk about as we've moved into phase 2, plan 2. We've talked about the first 4. We're prepared to document, we map our network, protect your network, and assess your network. Milestones 5 through 8 are controlling user access, managing patch updates, manage your baselines, and then document your network. So milestone 5 is control your network. This is the user access. This ensures the network security, but restricts user access. It accomplishes this by limiting the user to the privileges required for the user's job, limits local admins to the absolute minimum, uses regular user accounts for day-to-day work, uses role-based access controls. It doesn't let the users install software, sets account expiration dates, and also disables or removes accounts when a user leaves the organization. Milestone 6 is patch management. This establishes an update management process for all software on your network. You want to make sure that you patch all your systems on a regular schedule, apply critical patches whenever they are released, include mobile devices that connect to the network infrequently. You also want to automate the patching process. And you may use this, consider using the Windows Server's update service with this as well. Milestone 7 is managing baselines. So the baseline is the minimum requirements for your hardware, software, and network statistics. So this is the step where you provides rules for establishing the baseline. So in this, you create an approved application list for each class, a device on the network. You establish the criteria and process for getting the application on the approved list. You want to make sure you verify the apps before adding them to the approved list. Create the device baselines, secure web browsers. Then you want to check that baselines for any security misconfigurations. So you review your baselines, and one way you can do this is by using the Microsoft Baseline Security Analyzer. Milestone 8 is to document your network. This is where you create the documentation for your network. This includes all processes and procedures that you went into to establish your network and set up your baselines and your security settings. Chapter 4 also talks about hardening your system. We're going to talk about Windows system hardening. That's the process of securing devices and software by reducing the security exposure and tightening our security controls. Now, one way we can harden the system is to use a trusted operating system. The trusted operating system, that's an operating system that comes hardened and validated as part to a specific security level. And it's going to be defined as in the common criteria for information technology security evaluation. Now, a lot of these TOSs, they provide significant support for multiple level security. That's a system in which multiple levels of classified data reside within the same system, but users are not permitted to access data at different classification levels. Keep in mind also all personnel must have access approval on a need-to-know basis. Another way to harden the system is to control logins and access to a system. To do this, you can limit privileges. This is something you want to do, especially the administrative privileges. Change the default passwords. Require complex passwords. Also require multi-factor authentication. You can use smart cards, fingerprint readers, text service, other apps that send verification codes to accomplish the multi-factor authentication. You also want to use configuration baselines. This is a set of consistent requirements for a workstation or server. Now, a security baseline is a component of the configuration baseline. It's going to ensure that all workstations and servers comply with the security goals of the organization. You can use these configuration baselines. You can use them to identify common configuration baselines that should be applied to all or a group of systems. You can use security templates to quickly apply security baseline settings. That security template's a safe set of configuration values that produce the system configuration as specified in the configuration baseline. When you apply the security template to a system, the settings within the template are applied to that system. Now, you can use these security templates. One way you do it is to quickly apply settings to one or more computers. You can also use them to configure a consistent security setting to your baselines. Or you can use these to compare the actual settings on a device to the settings that are required by the configuration baseline as well. Now, you do have some patch management types that you can use as well. For example, a hot fix. That's a quick fix for a specific software problem. This can be something that's customer specific, and it can also be used to patch security holes. A patch is something that's going to be designed This is a fix that's designed for a water development. So it's been more thoroughly tested than a hot fix, and it's designed for that water development. These are something that you'll see used for security holes or bug fixes. Service Pack is a collection of patches and hot fixes and system enhancements that have been tested by the manufacturer for wide deployment. We'll also have to talk about file server security. Now, some of the best practices for file server security is to prevent physical access. Have your servers stored behind a locked, controlled access room. You also to implement the principle of least privilege, only give people access to the files they need to do their job and nothing more. You'll use full disk encryption on backups. Also implement strong authentication. Remove any unnecessary software and disable unused services. Use the implicit deny access control list. Also use hidden folders and files and audit the file system is some of the best practices for file server security. The data transfer security protocols, big data storage. What we're going to talk about is the network attached storage and the storage area network. The network attached storage is a standalone storage device or application that acts as a file server. A couple things you need to be aware of where the network attached storage is that it is connected to the same network as all other network devices. So it is exposed to attacks from all network hosts. It typically uses standard protocols for file sharing. And keep in mind, because those protocols, standard protocols are well known, they are subject to attacks. This also, the device often has a limited operating system capable of sharing files and controlling access to those files using an access control list. And the administration should be secured with a strong password and strong authentication. The storage area network, that's a special network composed of high-speed storage. It's going to be shared by multiple servers. It's typically a separate network that only file servers are attached to. So with this, the security for a SAN is going to be provided by using a logical unit number that's masking identifies devices. The logical unit number masking identifies devices that are allowed to attach to a local unit. SAN zoning groups are where SAN devices and servers into security zones. So with that, the devices with that security zone can access data on the storage unit. The SANs are typically more secure than the network attached storage. There are some security protocols for data transfer. A couple of these, the FTP, the file transfer protocol. A couple of things to keep in mind of this is that it does use anonymous login. So these are allows unrestricted access to the FTP server. You can disable anonymous login, and that allows you to control access based on a username. The username and password are transferred in clear text, and that's something that can be captured in transit by some type of man-in-the-middle attack or sniffer. If you're going to protect the login credentials, you would implement a secure protocol such as the secure socket layer. You may use IPsec VPN tunnel to protect the data transfers. Write permission is going to allow users to upload files to the FTP server. So you want to make sure that you carefully restrict which users have that write permission. Also, the FTP uses port 21 for control information. This is such as your login, and port 20 is going to be used for the data transfer. The trivial file transfer protocol. This provides no authentication, encryption, or error detection. It uses UDP instead of TCP. This is something that might be faster than the FTP, but doesn't perform the error detection, so you could have results in file errors. The secure copy protocol uses Secure Shell version 1 to secure the file transfers and login credentials. The Secure Shell file transfer protocol, this uses Secure Shell version 2 to secure the data transfers. Now, this is something that's not FTP that uses SSH. So this is a secure transfer protocol that is different from the file transfer protocol. The secure FTP, this tunnels FTP traffic through a SSH tunnel. The FTP secure, this adds either the SSL or the transport layer security to the FTP. So you have secure logon credentials, and it encrypts the data transfers. This does require a server certificate. You can also manage file permissions. The share permissions control access through a network connection with a file server. So in this, if the files are accessed locally, share permissions do not control that access. The share permissions have 3 levels of permissions. You have the reader only, or the reader, which is read only, a contributor, which is the permissions to read or write, or the owner and co-owner, which gives you full control over all of the permissions. These share permissions can only be set on a folder. Now, the NTFS permissions, these can be set on drives, folders, or files. They can be used to control both local and network access. They have dozens of permissions that offer different levels of control over what actions are allowed. And they can only be set on volumes that are be formatted with NTFS. So now we'll talk about Linux host security. A couple of ways that you can secure your Linux is first to remove any unnecessary software. Now, the unnecessary software is going to occupy disk space, and it could also introduce security flaws. You want to check for unnecessary network services. These waste computer resources and increase the system's attack service. Also, locate any open ports. Open ports provide information about what the operating system of a computer uses. They can also provide entry ports for information and about ways to formulate an attack. To locate these open ports, you would use the Nmap utility, which we see an example of here. This one shows the default gateway's open ports. So we see the port and the service that is running on that port. For example, in this one we see port 80 is open with the service of HTTP. Now, in this case, if we're not using the machine to connect to a web services, we're not using it to connect to the internet, we would close that port. If we see any unexpected ports open, we may need to find the service that's open in that port and determine whether that service is necessary or not. If it's not, we need to stop the service and disable the service and close the port. Keep in mind, though, using Nmap, this is a tool that's used widely by hackers, so you may trigger some alarms and alerts by running this program. NetStat's another Linux Windows tool that we can use to scan for open ports. We can customize the NetStat utility to provide us with only the information we're specifically looking for. Now, with this, as with Nmap, we're going to have several command line parameters. So we see some examples over here of what we can modify and filter with NetStat that we can put in to get only those results. Now, keep in mind, not all of these results or all these options may be available. It's going to depend on whether we're using the Linux version of NetStat or the Windows version, because it does come for both Linux and Windows. So the lab we're going to look at in chapter 4 is lab 4.3.5, configuring NTFS permissions. So in this scenario, we got two groups of users who access the Corp Files server, marketing and research. We're going to go in here and we're going to disable the inheritance for both of these folders. We're going to remove the user groups from the access control list. And here we're going to add a marketing group to the marketing data and a research group. We're going to assign those groups full control, and we're not going to change any other permissions. So as this lab is loading, one of the things that I am going to do in this lab is I am going to work through each folder individually. So you'll see that I'm originally going to start with the marketing data and then research data. Instead of going through step 2 for marketing, step 2 for research, I'm going to go through each one of these for marketing and then go back and do each step for research as well. So we'll start by opening my Windows or my File Explorer. And I'm going to navigate to the D drive. As you see that these are on the D drive. So we'll start with the marketing data. So I'm going to right click the marketing data folder. And I'm going to come down to properties. Now, where we're going to be going in this to set the list up is in our security tab. So going into our security tab, we'll see that we have the different group users and we'll see the permissions. So we see administrator has all of the permissions. Users, you see, don't have full control. They cannot modify. They can only read, execute, list folder contents, read permissions. System owner can do everything but write and modify, or creator owner, excuse me. And system has full access. So from in here, we're going to choose advanced. And in here we can, this is where we're going to disable the inheritance. So we'll click disable inheritance. And I'm going to convert inherited permissions to explicit permissions on this object. Notice on here that we do have full control. They have read and execute, special, full control, and where these are inherited from, and what folders it does apply to. So I'm going to disable inheritance, convert this. Now, when I choose users here, this is the group I'm going to remove. So I'm simply going to select this and choose remove. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, when I come back to this screen here with the marketing data properties, this is where I can add another group and set the permissions. So I'm going to come into the edit, and then I'm going to choose to add a group. Now, this is where I will give this the appropriate name. So I'm going to add the marketing group to the marketing data folder. I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to click full control to give them full control and select OK. And then OK again. Now, I'm finished with the marketing data. I'm going to do the same thing with the research data. So I'm going to right click and come to properties, go to the security tab, and then down to the advanced. I'm going to disable the inheritance and then convert inherited permissions to explicit permissions on this object. Now remember, I want to remove the users. So I'm going to click the user group and click remove. Then I'm going to click OK. And now I want to add the research group. To add this, I'm going to click edit, add, and then name the research group. Click OK, and then I'm going to allow them full control. Click apply, OK, OK, and then I am finished with the lab. So in this lab, I have changed the permissions for the marketing data and the research data folders. I have removed the user groups, and I have added and created the research group for the research folder and the marketing group for the marketing folder. And I've also gave them their permissions of full control. So this is one way we can use an access control list to limit the flow of information. This is how we can set up the principle of least privilege is going through this. So I'm gonna click Score Lab and see that I have finished my lab at this point.